All right. Well, welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Mariano Fernandez with me, and he's been doing a lot of different things in the entrepreneurship space. So if I could just have you introduce yourself, Mariano, and then we'll get into talking about all the things you've been up to.
Yeah, so my name is Mariano Fernandez. I am from San Felipe Pueblo. I'm currently based in Albuquerque, but I've lived in New Mexico majority of the time. Been fortunate enough to kind of travel and live in other places, but most of my time has been spent in New Mexico.
So, Mariano and I met a few years ago at the American Indian Chamber of Commerce meetup that they had, and you were still a student at UNM at the time, and we were talking about what we were doing with the New Mexico Tribal Entrepreneurship Enhancement Program, and you were telling me that you have a lot of ideas for business startups, and that was something that very much interested you. So that's kind of how we met, and I just would love to hear what you've been up to since then, and what you've been doing in the realm of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so I just graduated with my MBA in December from the University of New Mexico at Anderson. But prior to that, I actually, from our conversation, you had introduced me to a program through CNM Ingenuity called Entrepreneurship and Development with Xavier Lemon. And part of that program kind of was five of us, 5 to 6 of us. But essentially, what it taught us was, okay, how do you take an idea? How do you kind of do market research and validate whether or not to go forward with the idea? And then how do you actually build upon the idea? From that, I learned a lot of crucial skills. Talking to people, getting to meet a lot of people, and just kind of further embedding myself into the actual entrepreneurship ecosystem within New Mexico. And since then, that kind of springboarded me even further to do a bunch of different roles. Currently, I work as the business developer for Ideas Tech, which we specialize in space computing. We have a couple of things flying up in the air right now, but I also work on the founding team of Liberty Fusion, where we're building a fusion reactor in the Santa Fe Midtown Center, taking Los Alamos technology and kind of figuring out a way to commercialize it and dispatch it everywhere. I also work with Ward Hendon for from Dangerous Ventures in something called the Entrepreneur in Training. It's a talent lab that we're kind of piloting to kind of further open the door for other people that are interested in entrepreneurship and wanting to kind of showcase hey, what does it take to get to a point to be VC investable? There's tons of other projects. I also work with an intern at Carbogenics, which is a climate-focused company that's really focused on taking biomass from forest fires and turning it into a product called Creechar. And in that way, you can use that into anaerobic digestive chambers to kind of sequester carbon. Um, there's tons of other work I'm working on Ohm Energy Intelligence, which is kind of my own idea, which essentially works as a coordinated system for energy generating assets to kind of communicate with each other as we start getting away from fossil fuels. So that's some of the stuff I've been working on. There's more, but it's been a busy, fun time.
That's exciting. That's a lot of different startups that it sounds like you have your hands in, which is
Yeah.
exciting. I'm wondering if you can talk more just about that experience and how you think entrepreneurship has impacted you as an individual, but also how you could see it, impacting your community, your tribe. Just can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I tend to think of entrepreneurship in a couple of different lanes. I think one, you have an entrepreneur, and then you have a visionary. And then the combination is kind of having both of those into the same thing. So I've kind of always been in the realm of not really following the rules. I'm not really great at I want to say staying within systems. So I tend to kind of want to create my own things. And I think because of that, relentless curiosity, it's always led me into different positions and different places, even though I have nothing, I don't understand sometimes what I'm doing. It's giving me the ability to actually take what I don't understand and concentrate enough of my energy to actually learn about what's happening and how I can impact that. And I think, having both the visionary piece, which to me is asking, what if? What if this is the way things could be? Not this is how things are. This is how it could be if the idea comes to fruition. And then kind of the other entrepreneur aspect of saying, like, hey, how can I actually turn this into something that's viable and can live? And then taking those two pieces kind of has transformed my life into everything I do. And that's what's led me to tons of different projects, uh, working on different deep tech startups, and just fundamentally getting as much experience as I can to start kind of springboarding these different initiatives in my community.
What do you think, like one of the most important things you is that you've learned over the past couple of years as you've been exploring this whole entrepreneurship world?
So it's funny. I think the one of the most important things about entrepreneurship is the ability to communicate. One thing that I've realized working in some of the deep tech stuff is that it's gets really complicated, and the words used can make it really hard for people to feel accessible to the information itself. So I actually know just from like cultural experience, right, that storytelling is a huge, huge aspect of it. And I think because of that being so embedded in my growing up, actually being able to tell the story in a way that everybody can understand has been a really, really important skill into everything that I do. And that whether that's explaining, hey, like what is a fusion reactor? How does the fusion reaction work? Or is it something more simple as like, hey, when I'm thinking of a coordinated grid system, how does that work for everyday life? And how can I explain that to my community members and people around me, whether that's investors, whether that's people that want to understand the technical aspect of it, or that's just everybody that just wants to take an idea of like, what does this mean? What do you mean by this?
What initially led you to like you kind of already talked about this, but wanting to start something or like wanting to start one of business. I don't know, you can talk about one of your businesses or just entrepreneurship in general, but what inspired you or led you to start your business versus like doing something else? Is there anything specific that kind of inspired you?
Yeah, I consider myself to be just a creative person in general. I love art, I love music, I love different things that people create and do. And when I was a kid, I would look to my grandparents who would paint and kind of do different potteries and do different things in terms of like artisans stuff. And it kind of gave me this spark of like, whoa, they took something from nothing and turned it into something. And at the time, I didn't really understood what that meant, but it was enough for me to kind of think at 11 years old of like, I want to do whatever they're doing, which is I want to be an inventor. And at the time, I didn't really have a grasp of what that meant, but I just knew that I wanted to create things. And over time, as I've been kind of on this journey of entrepreneurship, the biggest thing that I've learned is that you really can create anything, and it's not just an individual type of basis. Like the community can create things, you as an individual can create things. Human beings fundamentally are creative. And I think from being inspired of seeing what other people are creating and then also seeing what myself is capable of creating, it's kind of allowed me to kind of go down this path of like, okay, I see a fundamental problem that's happening here, and I see a reality in which this problem can be solved and be in reality would be a lot better for people. So it just kind of kept me down that path of wanting to create more and more.
You kind of mentioned and like alluded to several things from like your cultural heritage and like your upbringing that inspired and impacted you um now like and through like becoming an entrepreneur. Would you say that like there's a lot of things that Native people and Indigenous people have or like practice that influences entrepreneurship and like kind of goes hand in hand? Have you experienced that? It sounds like you have. Like it's almost inherent like in your blood, kind of.
Yeah, no, and to your point, like it goes back to right, like the fundamental skill, which is storytelling, and then also the other skill of like creating something. My grandma, she's a big seamstress and sewer. So every time I go up back to San Felipe, she's always sewing something. It's a new project. She's creating things. And then people around the community are like, hey, can you do this for me? Can you sew this portion for me? So even though my grandma probably wouldn't label herself as like an entrepreneur per se, she is still creating things and solving a problem that's in the community. And I think, living in a community that kind of relies on each other, that really inspired me to see like, okay, over time, learning the stories of like what's gotten us through different events of the world and different things, and then also combining that with how we've made creative solutions to do that, really to me is one of the strengths of culturally where we've come from that has been very powerful to everything I do today.
It kind of shows how like those skills and like you said, your grandma is a seamstress. It's not exactly like entrepreneurship, but a lot of the skills, the mindset, it translates into some of this like high-tech entrepreneurship that you're doing right now as an adult. Um, and I think it kind of shows, other young people that yes, you've learned like all these skills that it's transferable into like these other areas of life in the world. How do you see that type of mindset, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
impacting not just yourself, but your community and like how can tribes and like other rural communities who have those skill sets that are just maybe being used in a different way, like how can they translate them into like the modern day, like entrepreneurship? Can you talk a little bit about your experience and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think so fundamentally my mom growing up, she kind of told me I could do anything. So that also kind of that fundamental self-belief of like you can really do anything has been kind of ingrained in me since I was a kid. But I really think that belief does start internally, right? If you can believe you can do anything, anything that you see that seems impossible, you can go and tackle and learn the skill. Hard skills and technical skills can be learned. I think the soft skills tend to be more based upon what you see yourself and how your perspective of others is upon yourself. And I think when you can kind of remove the noise and say like, okay, who am I truthfully? What do I believe I can do? You can kind of see a direction of like, okay, I really care about this. It could be anything from something environmental, whether that's water or that's the way that the land is used, or maybe it's something you see more in the ethos of the internet and you want to solve a problem that's showcasing through software. But it ultimately starts with the foundation of the youths believing that they actually can achieve these different things. And I think the more that that kind of gets kind of pushed towards in this idea of like what that truly means to believe in yourself, the more likely that people can foster an idea of like, wait a minute, if my idea were to exist out here and I believe that I can actually go and do it, and then the resources are around them to say, like, I might not actually have all the resources, but there's enough resources here to go and build something, then they're going to go forward and really, really do that. But initially, I think it really starts fundamentally with a spark of saying, like, can I do this? And do I believe in myself enough to go and try and do this?
Can you talk a little bit more about like maybe one or two of the projects that you're currently involved in where you're kind of using some of those skills, and just share a little bit more about like specifically what startups you're working on and just kind of what that is like?
Yeah, so the one that's really exciting to me right now is Liberty Fusion. So we're taking a technology out of Los Alamos Labs called the PJMIF, Plasma Jet Magneto Inertia Fusion. And essentially it's, or PLX for short, but it's a bunch of plasma guns that we believe can shoot upon a magnetized target to produce fusion energy. So the goal of that right now is to move it down from Los Alamos Labs, and we are the executive license holder. So Koichi Masuda is the CEO and the founder of Liberty Fusion. So I'm helping him in kind of bringing this down to Santa Fe and really start to build the business and what the business will look like here as it operates in New Mexico. But that one, we just actually raised $2 million on our pre-seed. So that was closed, I want to say the 31st, but it was in beginning of January that we closed that fundraising round.
Wow, that's a big deal. Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
like, that's a whole other world that, I mean, I know I work in tech transfer and economic development, but I'm like the resource provider. When it comes to like pre-seed, all that, like raising funds, that's so like over my head. At least I feel that way. And I feel like a lot of people might feel that way. But I'm wondering if you can kind of just share the benefits that you think there is to like you working on a startup like this and like I guess also having like indigenous people and tribes involved in these types of efforts and like
Yeah.
startups and economic development, like what value do you think like Indigenous people bring to the table when it comes to that?
So I think as an indigenous person working in deep technology, right, a lot of the skills that have been culturally relevant to us for a long time, storytelling, the big one, is a really key piece to helping the community and others understand what this technology does. Um, Fusion, New Mexico, and anything nuclear has always had a weird kind of, I want it not collaboration is the correct word, but more or less kind of in proximity to each other. It's never been really good or bad. It's always kind of like, what is this thing do and what is the mystery of it? And I think really as an indigenous person in this field and building this reactor in Santa Fe, one thing that we're really trying to work on is understanding and getting the community to understand like, hey, what is fusion? What does fusion do? In a way that's easy for everyone to understand that it's not mysterious. It's nothing that's like this boogeyman in the corner. It's a thing that can really benefit, especially tribal nations that are looking for energy sovereignty. So storytelling and being able to kind of simplify the terms in which everybody can understand is one way that operating in this place has really helped.
Are there any like challenges or barriers that you've faced with Liberty Fusion or any other startups that you've been working with?
So I think previously it was a resource question. It was more or less understanding like, hey, where do we even get funding for this? Can this be funded in New Mexico? And I think a lot of startups, not just really the ones that I've worked on, but from what I've heard, have honestly faced that same question of like, I want to build a company, I want to do a startup, and then they leave New Mexico. And it's been kind of a reoccurring thing, but the state currently is really, really working towards ensuring that resources are pouring towards innovative technologies, towards entrepreneurs and people that actually want to start and run with this technology and really build businesses and stay in New Mexico to employ New Mexicans. So previously, I would have said it was a resource question, but now fundamentally, I think it's gone to a point where it goes back to the visionary piece of like, okay, what if the world could work differently? And now the barrier in front of me is more of like trying to get people to see, hey, wait, what if it could work differently? It doesn't have to be this way. What if we can change the way things work? So that's the current thing I face.
So you mentioned that like at first it was a resource question. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the resources and programs that you found along your journey and what's helped. And yeah, what are those resources that have helped you that other people might be able to tap into?
Yeah, so and I'm more than happy to send all of this so you can distribute out. But the state of New Mexico, specifically the Economic Development Department, has tons of different resources pertaining on what the key industries are. So if you're an entrepreneur that is interested in kind of the tech industry, deep technology, there's tons of grants, tons of different initiatives that will fund programs there. Other programs on the top of my head are going to be kind of like DOE boost, fed technology. So if you're wanting to take technology out of the labs and kind of find a way to commercialize it, those are programs to look out where they'll kind of put you in a cohort, give you access to resources and mentors. And I believe one of them actually pays you to start kind of thinking of how to commercialize those ideas. CNM Ingenuity is a great place as well. That's where I got kind of the first taste of how do you take an idea, validate, and make sure it works. But also UNM Rainforest. So our universities, the state of New Mexico has tons of resources, but also I think at the tribal nation, if you're interested in building a business on just the tribal level and kind of headquartering in the tribal nations, I think it's very important to talk to your tribal leaders and say, like, hey, I have this idea. Are there any resources currently available to do that?
Have you tried working with your tribe specifically or approached them in that way?
Yeah, so currently I'm working on something, I want to call it an economic coalition. So it's a tribal economic coalition, and I had reached out to my tribal leader, Carla Moore. She's the director of education at San Felipe Pueblo, and she's directed me. She's very great, and really the initiative of what I'm trying to develop is a framework in which all the tribal nations can work together. So, right, this is still kind of an idea that I'm testing the waters on, but I approached it with an honest question of like, hey, I really want to get involved in helping my community. I've been very fortunate in all the opportunities that I've been given. I want to open the door, build a ladder, and bring people to the door. So I can say, like, hey, we can do this as well. And I think from just having that honest conversation with her of like, how can I help the community? How can I give back? Because my community has given so much back to me, has really opened the door of like, okay, we can work together and trying to figure out how this works.
I feel like if there's younger people listening, a lot of times, like you mentioned before, not just companies, like companies have a hard time starting and then staying in New Mexico, but I think young people as well just feel like there's no opportunity for them here. Would you say that entrepreneurship has kind of opened the doors to some opportunity for you? How could other people kind of maybe consider it as an opportunity? Or what would you say to young people, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. So right as I was approaching my undergrad, I got a job offer to go work at Nike. So after getting the job offer, I really sat there and thought, do I want to move to Oregon? Like this is the chance, right? I think a lot of young people that I've met have kind of had that similar question of like, oh, I want to move out of New Mexico. So much so that they tease UNM about being the university near mom. And I'm a UNM alumni, so I feel like I can say that. But there's a lot of young folks that feel like there's not a lot of opportunities here, not a lot to do. But it kind of flipped the question to me when I got given that job offer and that opportunity to actually leave. And it made me wonder of like, well, okay, if everyone just keeps leaving, of course there's no opportunity here because there's no one here to create the opportunities. And I think entrepreneurship is giving me a opportunity and a path to really say like, hey, actually, New Mexico is a very beautiful place here, and I'm biased because this is my home, but there's tons of different reasons why to love New Mexico. And I think over that journey, I just kept falling more and more in love of New Mexico and what New Mexico is. And entrepreneurship has given me that place to really start opening the doors to different opportunities to young people. But I really fundamentally believe that these things only work if we decide to build them. And as someone from the Generation Z, I think it's important that we decide, like, hey, we want to build this. We want this in our cities. We want this in our state. We want this in our community. We get to decide now, what do we want life to look like in the next 40, 50 years?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I had a very similar experience. I also went to and graduated from the university near mom and had that like thought of, oh, well, I maybe I could go somewhere else, but ultimately ended up here. And I'm really glad that I did because, like you said, it's like someone has to be that visionary. Someone has to be here to build that. And if it's our New Mexico, like it might as well be people from here, who have roots here, who understand like our history, but also have a vision for like how things could be, like incorporating that. tradition along with that like progress. One of our previous tribal liaisons, Zachariah Ben, always said like um if it's almost like if not me, then who would
Yeah.
do it? It's like we are the them. Like they should do this, they should do that. Like we are the they. Like we need to be the they, the people doing whatever it is that we think needs to be done. Is there um I guess I want to see if you could talk a little bit about your experience just like as an Indigenous person working in the startup and deep tech realm because it can be a very intimidating space in general. And I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
like, as an Indigenous person, what your experience has been being in that space.
Yeah. And so during freshman, not freshman year, during kind of undergrad, I had a chance to intern for PepsiCo. And I was one of the New Mexico hires. Everyone, the other person that was my cohort intern, person that was on the internship with me was from Oklahoma. So not from here, not from New Mexico, but I worked in state of New Mexico. But when we had went to the headquarters in Plano, Texas, I kind of had the feeling that I feel like a lot of indigenous folks have is like, whoa, I'm the only one in the room that really looks like me. And at first, when that first happened to me, I was kind of like, whoa, this is kind of weird. Like I feel a little alienated. But over time, I think that experience taught me of like, wait a minute, like one, why did I feel that way? And then two, like it never really inhibited me from connecting with other people. So I think there's a tendency sometimes to view ourselves as others when the reality is we're just like everyone else. We're people. And there is no othering. And I think when that mind frame can shift and adjust from being like, wow, I'm nothing like these folks, they're not going to be interested in me. It's it's to me a very dangerous headspace to be in. But when you can shift that to like, wait, I'm actually very interesting. I have a lot to say. I'm going to go advocate for myself and go say the things I want to say. People start to really recognize that and say like, huh, what does this person have to say? They're very different from our experience, and I really want to listen to understand what's going on. So being indigenous in the deep tech space now, it's very similar to the same thing that I dealt with when I was in PepsiCo, but it's kind of giving me more of a battery on my back to say like, okay, right now I'm the only indigenous person here in this room, but I'm going to keep opening the door. I'm going to keep getting more indigenous people to come in here and give their perspective because I can only offer one perspective. And I think the more that people kind of, like I said, stop othering themselves and say, like, no, I'm a human being. I have tons of ideas. I come from a different background, tons of experience. I want to tell the experience because it can really give a keen insight to what's happening and what the worldview is to kind of give a bigger perspective of what's happening.
I love that. That's so true. We everyone has something to bring to the table, and if you have a seat at the table, you might as well use your voice and, also invite other people to the table. Um, if like someone listening now, maybe they're like younger, older, they have an idea or they like are thinking about entrepreneurship, what would you like, what is a piece of advice that you would give to them or words of wisdom that you would say?
So I really thought about this for a long time. Like, it's a really hard question to ask because I feel like this journey is very robust. It can go everywhere. You have highs and lows, you have constant turbulence and chaos. But I think the one piece of advice that if someone has an idea and they really, really feel passionate and care about it, is to just take the leap. I think sometimes, especially when you have an idea and you believe it to be a really good one, it needs to exist. Whether you're the one that creates it, whether another person creates it themselves, that idea's turn is ready to exist. And I think if you have the idea now, take the leap and see where it takes you. Sometimes it might not be the correct idea, but what you learn from that is kind of a resilience and a grit to say, like, okay, this idea didn't work, but I'm full of other ideas that I want to keep pursuing this. And the more that you keep taking these leaps into the unknown, the more that you start to kind of get this feeling of like, okay, I have a more refined direction of where to go and how to do it.
What would you say like the best first step for like taking the leap would be?
So I think it depends, right? Like I feel like sometimes it can be very easy to just say like, oh yeah, just do the thing. But I think the funny part about just saying to take the leap and to just do the thing is to really just do the thing. So for instance, if I have an idea about like the Tribal Economic Coalition, the first step to me was like, okay, well, I need people to hear my idea because I need to get input and feedback of what that looks like, what people are saying and what they think. And over time, my idea can then take form and shape. But, if there's something that can happen if you overthink too much, and I know tons of people that tend to overthink, and it's kind of an analysis paralysis, right? Whereas you have an idea, you think about it, and you say all of the unknowns, all the things that could go wrong with it, all the things that can go right with it, but you're stuck in that stage of just thinking about it. I think when I say take the leap, it really is like go out there and do things. If it's an idea for a restaurant, start thinking of locations, start thinking of recipes, cook something for your family, and then give them the food and say, like, hey, what do you think of this? Would you, even if that's as funny it is, like, would you buy this? Like, what do you think you would pay for this? Simply doing that action kind of validates where you're going. And fundamentally, I think doing things more than just kind of thinking about it will help you along in refining that idea.
I've definitely noticed. I think that's a very unique mindset and like trait that entrepreneurs have is that they just do things. They're like they think about things too, but they just do it. Like I'm very much a thinker, a planner, like and that's why I've never started a business, but my husband, he's more of a like just he just does it. Like he'll think about it later, and
Yeah.
so he has his own photography business that he's started. But I think that is definitely that's good advice, but it's also a very unique trait towards people who I think flourish in entrepreneurship is that they just do, and then they figure it out as they go.
Well, so to clarify, like before I used to think a lot, so much like I would have that same feeling of like analysis paralysis, where I would think of something and be like, no, this couldn't work because X, Y, Z. And then I would defeat myself before I even got a chance to like go and tell someone about it. And eventually, when I started kind of experiencing more talking with people, I was like, oh, wait, actually, most of the time when people are creating something, they really are just figuring it out as they go. So on the outside, you see this huge company that's been valued at whatever, and you're like, how did they get to that point? And then you like read backwards of the story of the person that founded and had that idea, and you realize like at the beginning, they really had no idea what they were doing. They had an idea and then they started talking to people around them to say, like, hey, what do you think of this? And over time, it just built the momentum.
Awesome. Well, I think that's something that like anyone could incorporate. Like you said, it doesn't matter the idea. Like just go do something with whatever idea it is that you have. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or on here about like what you've been up to or any additional thoughts that we might not have touched on yet?
Yeah, so I've kind of touched on it a little bit during the podcast here, but I am working on something called a tribal economic coalition. And the whole goal of this is to kind of have a permanent seat at what economic development is happening in New Mexico and how tribes can also take advantage of that opportunity. I see this as something that in the future, in 100 years, that the tribes will lead and slowly kind of have an idea of where we want to head. So if anyone is interested in talking about that with me and or honestly wants to help and give me input and feedback, please reach out to me.
Awesome. And how can people connect with you?
The easiest way I would say is my LinkedIn. So it's Mariano Fernandez. It should be one of the first ones if you type Albuquerque right after Fernandez. But if not, I can give you my email address if you would like as well.
Okay, and I'll link your LinkedIn to the description and then I'll link the resources that you mentioned as well.
Awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mariano. I'm very excited to hear like everything that you're doing. I think you're a really great example of like what's possible, for young students, not just Indigenous students, but in general, like when you embrace entrepreneurship, like there's so many different things that you could do. And I think you're just a really good example of what it means to be an entrepreneur and like just taking advantage of all the different programs and opportunities. And so I'm really glad we were able to get on here and kind of share some of your journey, which you're also very early in your journey. I'm sure
Yeah.
that you're gonna have a lot more to talk about and a lot more accomplishments down the line because you're just getting started. But it's really exciting to hear what you're doing, not just in deep tech, but also your thoughts and your ideas for the economic coalition. It's all really, really exciting. And so I can't wait to just see what you continue to do. And we'll have to have you on again, as you
Yeah.
continue on your journey.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm excited to see where this goes. Obviously, I'm very optimistic in my capability to create things, but really what I'm hoping is that I can showcase that anybody can do this. It doesn't really matter where you're from. If you just have that determination to really stick with this, and also if you care. I think that's also another trait that fundamentally can be missed in entrepreneurship is actually caring about the thing you create. But I'm hoping that, the next time we meet, I can showcase like, hey, this is what's been going on and really kind of hopefully kind of ignite that spark.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.